Hi everyone, and welcome to my latest vlog episode. It seems like quite a while since I've been in talking with you because our Christmas period is now over. You may be watching this months or maybe a couple of years after the fact, but we've just had Christmas. My last vlog was quite an involved one because I was going through the Christmas decoration. This time round, I'm again kind of having it based or talking about a pattern, but I wanted to make it into kind of a bigger discussion on the type of pattern. It is, as you're seeing it, you probably can recognize that it is brioche. And brioche is one of those subjects that really hits off people's nerves, that people end up falling into one of two camps, either adoring it, like just thinking brioche is the best thing since sliced pan, or passionately hating it. And I actually sometimes have a discussion here with Laura, and we talk a small bit about it, and I'm not sure quite why it elicits such a strong response. Part of it might be how you're introduced to it, that it's not like the stitch pattern itself is not very difficult, but you can do quite complex things with it. And I actually think that that may be where some of the issues are coming in. That if you got introduced to brioche where you wanted to do, say, a very complex shawl and you had never done brioche before, so you suddenly jump in kind of like at the end of the game, so to speak, rather than building up slowly with a series of smaller techniques. And I suspect that might be where the problem is coming in, that you're kind of jumping in at the tail end of it. But brioche at its basis is not very complicated. It is, like, all you're doing is you're working every second stitch, and the ones in between you slip it and you wrap the yarn around it. So that's if you're knitting flat. It's actually the same on both sides. It's going to be, you'll do what's called a brioche knit, or BRK, or burp. I know that's bark, BRK, bark. I say brioche knit because I keep forgetting the bark and the burp. So brioche knit, BRK. When you do that, you've got the yarn over and the stitch that had been slipped, and you knit those two together as a single stitch. And then the next one, which, because you're alternating every other row, on the next row when you come over, when you hit that particular stitch that was slipped on the other side, this time, or that was brioche knit on the other side, this time you'll slip it and do a yarn over on it. So you're working opposite stitches on each side. Like, this is single color brioche, so that's what I'm talking about now. And when you're doing single color brioche, you're going to have and worked flat, of course. Worked flat is going to be the same thing on each side. When you see something that looks like a purl column on that side, you're going to slip the knit and yarn over. The one that looks like a knit column, that will have a stitch with the yarn over on it, that you're going to just do your brioche knit on, and you work along like that. The only thing to remember is the edge stitches. You're going to work it, you can either do kind of garter stitch, knit on one side, purl on the wrong side, or sometimes what's quite nice is slipping in on one side and just knitting it on the other side so that you have kind of a nice edging to it. Main reason you don't want to use the brioche right up to the edge is it's easy to lose yarn over it. It gets messy, and it just doesn't create a nice edge. I will talk about a few more things about brioche in a minute, but I think I might just kind of step through each of the different kinds of brioche. So that is brioche knit flat. It's very straightforward, but as you can probably tell, because you're only working every second stitch, it takes a really long time to grow. So it's slow to work because you're working 2 rows in order to work every single stitch. So it means that you're doing double the number of rows back and forth to get the same vertical length. So that makes it really slow to work, I find. And it can be a little frustrating as you're going through, because it can start feeling like you're knitting forever and you're not making a lot of progress. But that's the reason why, because you're only doing every other stitch each row. But the every other stitch each row is also why you can do, I'll bring a sample in a second, or I'll pop a photo up there for you to take a look at. It's also why you can do 2-color brioche. Because with 2-color brioche, the way that works is you're going to be on the first pass through on this side, you're just going to be doing the very same way as before. But then you slide your stitches all the way back to the start. You take your second colour, and this time you're working those purl furrows. When you work the purl furrows, you're going to do a BRP, brioche purl, or what would that, a burp, I think people call that, burp, brioche purl. And then the ones that look like knit stitches, you're going to slip and yarn over. So you work each side twice, moving back to the start the second time round, and you do it once with each color. So on the front, you'll have this side, you'll have stripes for the dark color, or the light color will be one color, will be the main one, or the knit stitch columns here, and it'll be reversed on the other side. Once you've done those two sides, you'll turn over here and you'll do one row that's just worked with the first color again, do your brioche knit, slip one yarn over, and then you'll do the second one. So it's alternating back and forth. And the really cool thing about that is it's a completely reversible fabric, but it looks the inverse of each other on each side, which is just a really, really interesting effect. So that's it, work flat. When you start working them in the round, let's join it in the round. If you've got one color, you're going round and round. So this time you'll be doing the first one with your slip one yarn over brioche knit, but the next time round you're going to step it along. So you'll be doing brioche purl, and these ones will be slip one yarn over. The easiest of all, I actually think, to work is in the round, two colors, because one color will always be your brioche knit when you're doing that round, and the other color will always be your brioche purl. So it's almost like the whole thing becomes color coded, and it's very straightforward. So bizarrely, the easiest way to work brioche, I actually think, is two colors in the round, because you've got your color coding set up. So that's the way I kind of pocket the 4 different types of brioche, and I would suggest working through those. If you've never done brioche before, start with flat one color brioche and just knit several inches till you've got the rhythm of it, because it's a little different. It's like you do need to get used to the idea of slipping every second stitch. That's really important, and once you get used to that and it feels comfortable, then you can, if your pattern calls for in the round, go move to in the round. If your pattern calls for 2 colors but flat, then move into 2 colors in the flat. But do start with a little bit flat with one color, just to get yourself comfortable with the stitch pattern. The kind of things that you want to look out for with brioche knitting are, can you see how stretchy this is? It is really stretchy. It means that it makes this lovely, thick, dense, squishy fabric, but that also means that it takes up a lot of yarn, and it's slow to work, and it has a tendency of stretching a lot. So you don't want to have anything that you want very fitted in brioche, because it's not necessarily going to hold its shape. It really wants to grow horizontally quite a bit. One way that can help to counteract that is downsizing a needle. Like it's the opposite of what you'd normally do. If I've got ribbing in a garment like this, I make that the larger needle size, and then I make the brioche a smaller needle size. So like the complete opposite from what you expect. And that is because brioche wants to grow. So drop your needle size down so it keeps just a little bit snugger, a little bit more contracted. Works much better. Other thing in relation to it wanting to grow a lot is you want to make sure your cast on and your bind off allow it to stretch or hold its shape whichever way you're going with it, because otherwise you can see the end of this is nice loose cast on, but the bind off is a little tight. Usually my recommended cast on and bind off for these would be starting with the Italian cast on is a good one for starting, because it 2 benefits. One, it mimics the knit purl stitch, so it means the cast on actually will work straight up from the edge. But secondly, it also is very, very stretchy, so you're not going to have any problem with the kind of holding it together and not allowing itself to expand. So Italian cast on is going to be your friend. Bind offs, the one I use most often is the sewn bind off or the tubular bind off. Benefit of that is because it's going to mimic the knit purl stitches again, similar to cast on, it really allows the brioche to flow right into the bind off. and it's also got a good bit of stretch. So those would be my two general recommendations for starting and ending. You may have something where there's different requirements, or you're doing, it's running into another stitch pattern or something like that, and that's fine. If there's nothing specified, those are the two ones that are good to take a look at. So now that I've given you kind of just a little bit of an overview of brioche, I will also, if you kind of jump in down here, I'm just going to add a link for you where you're able to go in and you can find all of my brioche tutorials, and I've also got a free brioche workshop that has all of the basics. So if you're brand new to brioche and you just want an introduction somewhere, that's a good place to start. If you already know how to do brioche but you want to just maybe refresh yourself with one particular technique or learn how to do just one particular technique, then the tutorials are going to be pretty useful to you, I think. I will drop those two links in for you so that you have them there. And I suppose what inspired this whole vlog is my Iascaire sweater. It's been one that I've been wanting to knit for a really long time. So I had it dreamed up last year when we were combining different yarns. We really, really liked the Caprito, which is the brushed mohair. And this one is Bloss to Light, which is a woolen spun, very woolly yarn. The two of those knit together are kind of a match made in heaven, really, to be honest with you. And as we were looking at it, we're like, they would be really nice in brioche because they're light, they're fluffy, and it would allow, I suppose, to really show off brioche to the breast of its briocheness. So we started experimenting. We started taking different ones of our Bloss to Light, and different fluffy yarns and combining them. So you can kind of see how this one was the Farraga, and it's got Admiral that is knit with it, so it gives it a real blue-green tinge. This one here, we've got Ore, a very goldy color, mixed with, let me separate them out here, with a much lighter color here from Sensei. And here we've actually got two different ones, this one and this color here, and it's got the same background color, but the fluffy yarn is different. So this was the Caprito in, I think it was Tisa, yeah. And this one is that Primrose? And this one was Primrose. So when you use Primrose, this is the color that you get. So you can see that the two of these together it's like it does have a background of the Blosta, where it's got kind of creamy beigey colors going, but you can still see the hand-dyed Caprito, kind of the colors moving back and forth through it. And even in this sweater, it's the same, the Tisa, there's slight variations in the color working through back and forth there. So the two, I think, really enhance each other, because this by itself, it's quite a fragile yarn, and it's woolen spun, so it's very, very light, and a little bit goes a long way. The mohair obviously is so fine that you can't ever use it by itself, but somehow the two combined, it takes the best part of each and enhances them. So you get the lightness of this, but the fluffiness and the airiness and the strength, because mohair is quite strong, so it really adds a huge amount of strength to this. And because it is so fluffy with mohair, you can knit it a little bit more loosely, but it's still going to be very warm and a nice fabric, but not too thick, because of course brioche has the tendency of being really, really dense if you're not careful. So the lightness of it allows it to be open and not excessively dense for brioche. So really warm, but very light to wear. So I might just talk through some of the decisions I made in the sweater and why I made them, and I suppose to a certain extent how they were tied to the fact that it was knit in brioche, which really determined this sweater, because I wanted to be kind of an ode to brioche, really looking at how you would take brioche and allow it to really shine and give it a sweater where the defining feature of it was how brioche works. So I started off And it began with an alternating cable cast on because we're going into ribbing initially. The ribbing was in our bigger needle, not wider needle. And just for a very short amount, just enough to give it a little bit of stability at the edge, because I didn't want the edge splaying out too much. So just having a little bit allowed that to happen. So you can see how it still continues up into the brioche, but it is definitely a very different texture to the rest. So then we just worked straight to the body up to here. It's cropped because I didn't want it getting too heavy, and I actually thought the style worked quite well cropped. You can most definitely make it a little larger. You do need to kind of take a look as well, I suppose, and be careful. Because it's designed to be oversized, the body down here is oversized, but the shoulders aren't. So if you decide to size down the body, you have to be careful that the shoulders aren't too narrow. So do keep that in mind if you opt to make the body a little bit smaller. The length of it, you obviously can make it longer. It is going to make it a bit heavier if you make it longer. So keep that in mind and make sure you have enough yarn. So that's kind of goes without saying, but just be careful. Just get enough probably for the next size up if you're thinking about extending the length of it. You just knit straight up to here, no shaping, keeping it very simple. At that point, we're going to divide the front and the back. And this is where the whole idea of brioche being allowed to shine really comes into play. Because one of the things I actually think I like best about brioche is the fact that you can allow something as simple as an increase or a decrease to form an entire stitch pattern. So like the way the armhole shaping happens here is we've got a little bit of bind off here, but then you're decreasing first of all every right side row, then every other right side row. But just look how pretty those decreases look. They're just like a feature into itself, and all it is brioche decreases. So you are doing it directionally, because brioche with the ribbing, those ribs really stand out. So you want to make sure that the directionality of it matches. So we've got them leaning into this side and over here, can't quite reach it, but leaning over into that side as well. And it just happens for a little bit up along here. And by the time you finish the decreases, the width of your shoulders should be the width of the garment, because it is going to be a set-in sleeve. A little different from what a lot of brioche sweaters are. They're more likely to be drop shoulders and have it kind of slide off. But I wanted the top of this to be a little more fitted, which would also help match it up with the fact that the body is a bit bigger. So it gives it a bit more structure. So that's where those decreases come in. Then up along the top here, we're doing the same in the front, but we're doing, I should probably have set it down here as well. When you're doing brioche decreases, you don't want them right on the edge because you won't see them. And they're such a beautiful feature that by actually having them couple of rows in, like here we've just got them a little bit in, it's a bit further in over here, but it means that you can really see the decreases and they're allowed to shine. Up on the neck, they're a little bit closer because that way they're right on the edge of the neck. Same as here, but it's just instead of going this way, it's leaning out this way and leaning out this way. Initially, you've got a bit of bind off here and you've got those decreases running along here. There's a few other interesting things I've done with this. So what I've also got is I'm doing a small bit of German short rows where I've kind of detailed through how to do it in brioche stitch. You're always turning on the brioche knit and you're doing it, you're only going to ever do it every second or every fourth, but like the even stitches, so they're always on a brioche knit. When you're doing the bind off across here, I've introduced Jenny's amazingly stretchy bind off so that you're not going to have it contracted in across the front. And same thing with the top of the shoulders, we're joining it with a 3 needle bind off, but again using kind of a super stretchy version of the bind off. You can actually, if you know how to do these different bits already, then you can just kind of fly through the pattern. If a lot of these are new or if some of them are new to you, there is a full pattern workshop that I've got available too, because as I was knitting through the sweater, I just recorded each section as I was going. So if you think that you're going to need a little bit of extra help, or you just like to kind of double check how I did it as we're going along, then check out the workshop. It should be very helpful to you. So that's the edge of this. top neck here, you can probably see is a 1x1 ribbing. I've done double lengthed, folded it inside, and then to kind of keep it nice and stretchy, instead of doing a bind off, you're actually sewing the live stitches into the inside, into where you pick them up. So that, again, that's all done in camera, but it allows for like really nice stretchy neck. The one thing that I wanted to do on this that was caught me out a bit as I was coming through is one of my favorite set-in sleeves is short row set-in sleeves from the top down, where what you do is you pick up stitches around here, you take the top section, like top third, top quarter in the middle, and if you're doing a standard one, every single row you're taking one more stitch and going back and forth, doing the short rows back and forth, so that forms the curve of the sleeve, the top of the sleeve cap. A bit like if you've turned a heel with short rows, same kind of thing. It's going from this direction to this direction by doing short rows. But you know what I was talking about on the top, how short rows are really tricky to do in brioche if you're trying to do them every stitch, because trying to do a slip one yarn over and then do a short row on it's just not going to happen. It's not going to happen. So what I did instead, and this took a while because I did 2 or 3 iterations. The first time I gave it a shot and I'm like, that's a disaster. That's not going to happen. So I kind of left it sit for a little bit, put it in the naughty corner, and just sat there for a while I thought about how to sort it out. Then I realized that you don't have to do all your short rows in one go. You can do it in what I refer to as wedges. So you can have the same length, but you can do it in 2 smaller triangles built one on top of each other. So what I was able to do that way is the first time round, I was doing it every brioche knit, then I knit all the way around, or brioche knit, I suppose, all the way around, and I did the very same thing again. So I got the full depth, but I didn't make it too difficult to do those short rows. So that's how I ended up thinking through the process, and it meant something that it looks like a very simple garment, but there's a lot of little techniques, small details, things that they make it fun to knit, but it did mean that I had to spend a long time when I was designing, thinking it through, because stuff that I just said, oh yeah, I'll just do the short row sleeve cap. I went and I sat and I'm like, that's not really going to work, is it? So that's how I ended up needing to take a little bit longer with the design process, because this originally came on holidays with me this summer. I started the body, and when we were sitting in Portugal, I was just knitting round and round as happy as could be. But again, because we're in holidays and because it's brioche, I actually made much less progress than I thought I would. I thought I'd like have flying off the body, but it was actually maybe a month later when I had other projects finished that I came back to it. And then it took a little bit to think through each of the details, but there wasn't a deadline on it, so I was able to kind of leave it sit in between, think about how I wanted to fit it together, and come up with a solution that I was happy with and made sense. And should have made sense, well, hopefully it should make sense from a knitting point of view as you're going through. But now, kind of having gone through the vlog with me, you should kind of have an idea of the process and the thought process when I'm designing something like that. Taking brioche, what it does best, what its shortcomings are, and then figuring out how to build that into the kind of pattern that I envisioned. So sometimes simple end outcome and quite styled and tailored. It has quite a lot of techniques going into it to make it look seamless. So now you know all of the secrets behind the design process on this. So this is coming out this week. It may actually already be released as we speak. I will put some links to the pattern and to the workshop and to the yarn kits down below for you to take a look at. But I hope you enjoy the little kind of trip into brioche and all the things you can do with it. If you enjoy this, make sure you subscribe to the channel. And if there's something you'd like me to talk about, or you've got a question knitting related, just fire it on up here, put it into the comments, and I will put it on my list for topics for vlogs, because it's really nice when I can address something that you're interested in hearing about, or that's puzzled you, or that is causing you difficulty, or you'd like to know more about, because it gives me a good starting point and I can kind of talk a little bit around the topic then. But thank you for joining me today. Enjoy your brioche Iascaire knitting.